I was a really good girl. I was the opposite of Fran. I was more like Hermione Granger when I was at school, and I used to enjoy making coloured revision timetables and boasting how many hours revision I'd done with my friends. But I always envied people that were bad, and secretly I wanted to be bad. I researched different items that teenage girls might have with them, which might help them in a survival situation. One of the first pieces of research I found was that women are actually biologically better able to survive than men because they can have up to 11% more body fat, so they can last longer, and if they get caught in the sea, they're actually more insulated and warmer. I wondered what a teenage girl might have with them, and I thought they're likely to have things like lip balm. That's made of petroleum jelly, so it's great for fire starting. I also researched tampons, and I found that lots of survival experts actually keep tampons with them as part of their survival kit, because they're great for using as tinder. Because the cotton's highly flammable. Other ways they're used are they're really sterile, so you can use them to cover wounds, and you can even use them as a water filter to filter out any pollutants from water before you're boiling it. And apparently the original use of the tampon wasn't for female hygiene at all. It was used in the war, I think it was the First World War, to actually plug gunshot wounds, and that's the original use for them. I think it would have to be somebody that had excellent survival skills, and if it was a fictional character it would be Katniss Everdeen, because she is obviously really used to surviving. She's great at hunting, and the Hunger Games is a survival arena. A real person, I was thinking of women survivalists, and my book was inspired by somebody called Lucy Irvin, who wrote a fabulous book called Castaway, which is a real life account of her year on a desert island, where she answered an advert to marry a stranger and live as his wife for a year. And at the age of about 21, 22, she left her job, left her life in London, and got married to a middle-aged man and went to live with him as his castaway wife. And so she would be quite good because she's been through that experience before. I think I would have to bring some comfort reading. So anything like the Narnia books, or maybe some childhood Enid Blyton books. I seem to remember that lots of those stories, the children are always in caves, foraging and trying to survive on islands and in valleys. I'd also bring a really long book, and that would probably be something like War and Peace, because it always really annoyed me that I got halfway through it at university and never finished it. So I'd have all the time to finish that book. I would probably take Life of Pi, because there are survival elements. So is that 3 books? I would take something with a fabulous setting for escapism, so something by Daphne du Maurier or Sarah Waters with a gothic, very English setting, because I'll probably be a bit homesick. And also a survival handbook which told me about all the poisonous creatures and berries on that island. I wrote the book in a 6-week intensive session in my caravan in West Wales, and the only companion I had with me was my dog, Basil, who's a little Jack Russell. And I actually, for a week, I kept going home in between, but for one of those weeks I decided to live only off the contents of my food cupboard in the caravan, and I often rent it out, so I had to use really quite horrible food items that other people had left in there. There was tomato cup of soup, which I lived off for a bit, a big bag of porridge, no milk, so I had to make the porridge with water and raisins. I think I took sardines with me, and I also lived only off coconut water, so I bought cartons of coconut water. It was incredibly depressing, and hopefully some of that depression of not being able to eat what you want comes through in those sections in the book. My day job, I'm surrounded by young people, so when I'm on break duty I can't help but listen into conversations, tune in and out of them. I think being with students that age does help me write in that voice in my books. One of the first things that we do as teachers after the long summer holidays, we have training in safeguarding issues, and if there are any child protection issues in school, we have to tell the head of safeguarding. And I've often wondered if students would ever feel a sense of betrayal if the teacher they confided in has to give that information out. And that was my starting point really with Fran and her situation. I quite like the way that she thinks that she's a monster, but really she's very loving to her little brother and later to the little dog in the book. And in that sense she's unreliable because the way she perceives herself isn't the real self. So I like that. I like the fact that she's quite streetwise and urban, and she has to use those survival skills to survive in a completely different setting. And I hope that despite her being a bit of a spiky character, she's likeable in the end. I'm working on another contemporary adventure book. I think for me setting's really important, and it was really difficult to match the desert island setting in the island. And I think for me setting is almost another character in my books. So I've decided for my next book the setting is going to be a circus, and my starting point is a teenage girl who is sitting her final exams in school, and she gets up in the middle of the exam and she stands and she walks out of that exam hall and she just keeps on walking. So it's a story about a runaway rather than a castaway, and most of the setting is in a circus.